Welcome to the WWH show. This is a show that asks a series of why, what, and how questions on topics that have national, regional, and global significance and implications. Today we have such a topic to talk about. Why bridging the leadership generational gap is timely and relevant. To talk about this topic, we have a privilege to bring in this studio Dr. James Dulla. He is a retired Army Force Major and Vietnam veteran. He is also Health and Human Services Director for Prince George's Community College. He is also a three-time Who is Who awardee. Thank you very much, Dr. Dulla, for being here to talk about why we need to bridge the leadership generational gap.
Well, it's certainly my pleasure to be here today. I look forward to enjoying some engaging conversation.
Yeah, I look forward to it. My first question is, why do we have a generational gap? We know that there are age gaps, whatever gap there are, educational gap, fine, but why is there a huge generational gap that affects many levels of society, at the family level, societal level, and organizational level?
You know, that's a good question. To define generational gap, in many of my lectures that I've given in the past in my college courses, I've always defined the generational gap as the way the previous generation did things in concert to the way generations of today do things. It takes a mindset change. It takes a paradigm change,
yes,
and a way of living change to really set back and see how things have changed throughout our society. So when we look at a society that has a generational gap, we're looking at probably like my parents looked at me when I grew an Afro hairstyle. What's wrong with this generation?
Exactly.
And so we have that because each generation brings to the table its own way of thinking, and we call it progressive thinking. Whereas one generation, like my father's generation, was more involved in the blue collar struggle, trying to get theirs. My generation was the generation that was the civil rights generation, and we call ourselves that generation that marched and stood up so that we would have ours, so that we could give a better life to our children. So somewhere between that blue-collar mentality, if I just work hard, I can afford life the way that I want to live, the way that I want to live. Somewhere between that generation, which was the World War II generation, my generation, which was the Vietnam generation, and the Civil Rights generation, whereas we had more opportunities and liberty than ever before because of the Civil Rights Movement, to this generation, or the past generation, Generation X, which got everything because we wanted to give our children things. And now we have a millennial generation, whereas they expect things. So we have all those philosophical and mindset changes that have taken place that has led us to the disconnect when it comes to the way generations think, which leads us to the generation gap.
But don't you think that the generational gap is more severe now in this era than compared to in the past? The generational gap in the past is a little bit narrower compared to now because of technology, because of globalization and so on. The new generation took advantage of technologies and so on. So we see gap between generations, which we haven't noticed before, even if there were generational gaps in the past, but the generational gap that we are experiencing in this era looks like a little bit wider. So what are the factors that are contributing to widen the generational gap? As you said, in terms of mindset, in terms of expectations, in terms of character, personality, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. My grandfather probably used or if it had opportunity, would have used a manual typewriter. My father probably, in the United States Navy during World War II, probably used a manual typewriter. I learned to type on a manual typewriter. Then somewhere along the line, there was a word processor, and down the road in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, we became IT savvy. And opening up the world to IT reform, and then opening up the world to an internet, and then opening up a world to, well, Apple computers, and now Apple iPhones and so forth and so on, iPads and the whole 9 yards. It left the older generation behind. I had secretaries that worked for me that said, I will quit before I learn to use a computer. and unfortunately, several did. But that was the mindset. I learned on a manual typewriter. I'm used to an electric typewriter. I don't want to go to the next step in the 20th century, which is the computer. So we learned to operate in our world, and at my age, at 65 years old, we learned to operate in our world based with the tools we had. The young people came along, and all of a sudden, there's social media. There's a lot of windows open to them that we're not even aware of. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'm hearing new ways to communicate by social media every day, and I'm saying, what is that? So yes, there is a huge generational gap because of the development of IT, which means that our youth speak a different language than we do. So how do we connect the dots to be able to speak together?
Exactly. That's the main discussion here, because yes, there is a generational gap, but how can we bring the two generations or the 3-4 generations together? Because the challenges that now we face are extreme. Unless we come together, especially after I read a report, a data which said that 33 million people going to retire by 2020, just in the United States.
Right.
Now, Europe, Japan, Australia, they have even more older generation. Mm-hmm. Now, where that does leave us, mm-hmm. which means think about the challenges today that we face, whether it is religious fundamentalism, environmental degradation, poverty, poor governance, corruption. Mm-hmm. These are really challenging days. And how can we bring these generations together, prepare the next generation, mm-hmm. empower the next generation, and let them solve the majority of the problems that we face today? Mm-hmm. So do you think that, even I ask this way, why do we need to bridge the leadership generational gap? Is it timely? Is it relevant to do it?
Mm-hmm. You know, bridging the leadership gap is very important. And oftentimes when I speak, or I give a presentation before a high school or college class or a civic organization, I often say we have to get back to basics. And when I say get back to basics, it sends a resonating tone throughout the audience, because all of a sudden they ask, what's basics? And then I have to explain that when we get back to basics, we go back to a time when elders were a part of our community. Because elders in past generations was that bridge that we're looking for,
from the past
that connected past to present and passed it on to future. In America, we have, and I've traveled extensively as a military officer, and many of the cultures that I visited, I noticed that they were still incorporating the wisdom of their elders into the overall leadership aspect. But when you come back to America, all too often, we push the elders aside. And so when they pass on, so does that wisdom they had. So my recipe for success is to bring the elders back to the table. And I'm an essayist. I've written thousands probably of essays, and many of them have incorporated the idea that we need to bring elders back into the growing process, because we have a lot of mentoring programs that realize that we have these gaps. And the mentors are in their 30s and 40s. And my question to them is, who's mentoring the mentor? So we need to not only bring back the elders, we need to also join forces with the current mentors in order to teach the future leaders both honesty, ethics, what it takes to be a leader, character building, and the whole 9 yards. So it takes a team effort. It takes a team effort, which we are not incorporating into our society at this time. But we need to get back to basics. And I think that's the only way we're going to be able to make sure that we're grooming the next generation of young leaders.
By the way, you mentioned a very important point that I haven't noticed. I have been here 10 years in the United States, so I don't exactly know everything like you do. You mentioned that in the American culture, it excludes the old generation. When I see our culture and some other communal-based cultures, because in this world we can divide cultures into two, individual-based cultures and communal-based cultures. We can say the United States, Europe, and Australia, and Canada can be categorized as individual-based cultures, and those cultures in Africa, Asia, and South America, they can be categorized under communal-based cultures. So on those cultures, in the communal culture that I have exposure and experience, I have seen that the elderly, the old generation, they don't want to transfer the baton. They don't want to give authority, power. They may put them, here and there, the young generation, but they don't empower them. They stay in that power position. I mean, it could be political, community organization, or business. They stay there until they die without raising generations, without raising leaders, and without having succession plan. But I see in the United States kind of the reverse. So how can we balance this? Because in our culture, we see that many senior leaders, I don't mean all, many of them, they are somehow reserved. They don't think that the young generation is ready to take leadership positions. But that has a price to pay, because if you don't give them leadership position and empower them, mentor them while they are taking some actions, they may stumble, they may make some mistakes, but when you mentor someone, you give them authority and then just watch them. When they make mistake, you use that for learning opportunity, for growth opportunity. So how can we balance this, bringing the old generation into the table, bringing the young generation also to the table, and creating a leadership spectrum where all generations are represented equally?
You're beginning to see that in America now. I belong to 3 different organizations that I attend their meetings regularly, and the key focal point is, let's bring the elders to the table. There's an organization called the Evolutionary Elders whereas several of the elders got together, and they said, let's work with the mentors so that we can educate young ladies and young men for future growth as leaders. And you're beginning to see this become more widespread from organizations like the NAACP, the National Urban League, and SELC, and others who are beginning to say, okay, we're getting older now. And if we don't start bringing the youth to the table to prepare them not only for leadership across the board, but to raise the next generation of politicians, to raise the next generation of clergy, to raise the next generation of community-based organization leaders. If we don't do that now, when we go, and hopefully that'll be a while from now, what we have in us will go with us if we don't share that and teach it. So all across America now, you're starting to see community-based organizations and national organizations come together to say, you know what, something's missing. And that missing ingredient is we have not prepared the next generation to take our place. Dr. W.B. Du Bois said we have got to prepare the way for them to assume our positions. And so now you're beginning to see that mindset change. Did you see it 10 years ago? No. Did it leave a void in who we are when it comes to a people that wish to develop our young leaders? Yes, it left a void. But are we beginning to recognize that there's a need for change in the way that we raise that generation so that they will assume responsibility? Yes. And the key to doing that is not only coming together collectively, but education. So you're starting to see education programs spring up across America in different forms that say we want to teach them how to communicate, we want to teach them leadership, we want to teach them how to get a job, we want to help groom them so that they don't only just get the job, that they're successful. And the meeting that I was in yesterday said, and we're going to focus on leadership skills. So that is beginning to happen, and I'm so happy it is because I've seen that void.
I'm excited also that you know that we have already invited you to be the keynote speaker for our upcoming conference on June 27 on Saturday about this same topic. Okay. So I'm excited about that because our organization, Pro Leadership, picked up this theme because we have seen that there is a clear leadership generational gap, and there are only very few organizations, as you mentioned, which are now picking up this thing and taking it seriously. So we want to bring people, leaders from both seasoned leaders and emerging leaders together in one room and talk about how can we bridge the leadership generational gap. So how do you anticipate and expect that conference, because you're going to be the keynote speaker? What kind of things are you planning to bring and challenge the conference participants?
First of all, I'll challenge them to get on board because it takes a village.
Yes.
And when I look at to raise the child, and when I look at a village, I look at the role of the elders. I look at the role of families, who must get involved with this initiative to groom their children so that, as my father used to say, so that they will be better than the previous generation.
Yes.
And I look at society as a whole. What is society doing to help out? So for the conference, I'm looking for a tone that to be set that will say it takes us all if we're going to prepare the next generation for the challenges they will face. And I'm going to challenge them straight up, not only to get involved, but to take a look at the Du Boisian process. I taught in my college classes, and I give it in many of the speeches, and I've taught it around the country. That when we look at the Du Boisian, W.B. Du Bois, who was a scholar, the first African American to graduate from Harvard University with a PhD, and is now buried in Ghana because his ideas were so radical. But Dr. Du Bois said, first of all, you got to recognize that there's a problem. We have to recognize that we have a problem in the gap, as you talked about, and then you have to analyze that. The second step is analyze that problem thoroughly. Why do we have that gap? And once you identify why you have that gap, the third step is now to come up with possible solutions to addressing that gap. Okay, if there's an IT gap, let's start educating elders on what social media is.
Exactly.
And I'm the president of a club right now and a chair that we're bringing youth in, and they're teaching me how to, not just me, but the whole executive board, and they're in their 30s. They're teaching us how to communicate by way of social media. And that's why I'm saying they're blowing my mind. Yeah. So
you mentor them on leadership, they mentor you back in the area of IT. You brought a very important topic here. Mostly when I meet some leadership experts, mentors, and coaches, they focus mainly on developing the person. But as you mentioned, it takes a village. We can't just, for example, I as an individual may grow, but I cannot do the job that I'm supposed to do if I'm the only one individually doing it. It takes families to invest in this thing. It takes communities, societies, organizations, governments, multinational organizations to be convinced that it's really critical that if we don't bridge this leadership generational gap, we're going to have trouble, let's say, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now. The challenge that we face right now is very severe. You can only solve it by raising leaders who are passionate about, because think about in our history, the challenges we have had, whether it is lack of this and that, somebody took leadership, innovated something, somebody invented something, somebody came up with a solution, a message that changed the whole world. So the challenges for we have now and the obstacles, the roadblocks that we experience as a human race, we have really leaders out there. If we empower them, if we coach them, mentor them, in the future, we're going to have solutions to these problems. But if we just think that things work out by themselves and just let each individual be a leader, develop, it doesn't work that way. We need to bring in all the stakeholders, as you mentioned, the village. In the village, you have different generations, institutions, organizations, communities, and so on.
You know, when I was director for Health and Human Services for Prince George's County, by the way, I took a look at society as a whole in our county, and I developed what we call the social circle. And the social circle looked from how we develop our youth in our society. And that social circle is very important. Where does it start? The outer circle is with the family, because the family is the first influencer of the children.
Exactly.
If the families get it, that they need to groom their kids in a certain way and make sure that they have certain tools to use at their disposal, then that's an advantage. From the family circle, we go to the next circle, and that's the community circle, because the community circle reinforces what the family is doing.
I like this model.
It reinforces it. The one inside the second circle, which is the community circle, is the peer circle, because in a community, peers influence each other in a dramatic way. And so what happens in the family may be the basic principle for developing that child. The community reinforces that. Then the peers have to work it out. And then once you pass the peers circle, then it goes to the schools. And so when you look at it, the schools, the peers, the community, the family, all have a part to play in developing that child, whether it's from IT or whether it's from a social standpoint, a leadership standpoint,
business
interfaith standpoint, business standpoint. Everybody plays a role, and that's why I developed the social circle, because it shows the responsibility of everybody coming to the table. And if we're going to start building the next generation of young leaders, that circle is so important, because everyone has to be on the same page. The goals and objectives have to be defined in a way that everybody can understand them. And then everybody has to work together to help create that next generation of young leaders.
So what do you think the roles of the seasoned leaders, the experienced leaders, and the emerging, the young leaders, what are the roles that they should play so that we could be able to bridge this gap?
The senior leaders should do exactly what Dr. Martin Luther King done, and use the formula by Dr. Du Bois. They should identify what the problems are. They should analyze them thoroughly, like Dr. King did. They should come up with possible solutions as a community, and then they should implement the best solutions. That is what the seniors should do at the table. It's being done. Okay, they realize it's a generation gap. We have a problem. It's a generation gap. Okay, why do we have that problem? Because we have not connected as a society all the generations. The elders are over here, the youth are over here, the families are over here. We have people that are displaced due to foreclosures, people that are living in shelters, people that lost their jobs due to downsizing and things of that nature. So we have had a lot of stuff to go on. So that created a dysfunction when it comes to the connectivity between the development of our youth, because many have been displaced. And so now we go to the possible solutions, and that's what you're seeing develop now. People are meeting all over this country to say, how do we solve this crisis? That's the role of the elder leaders. That's the role of the mentors. But the youth are now coming to the table that says, I need help. I'm seeing more and more youth who are saying, I need a mentor. I'm going to more and more organizations now that have mentorships. Organizations like Men Aiming Higher, Men Mentoring to Manhood, and so forth and so on, that are there to help our youth. The grooming process is taking place. It may not be all over television, but I see it every day. And I
The
go
media may not pick it, but
the media may not pick it
yeah.
up because it's not bad news.
Yeah. And
This is good news.
But I mean, this is very important to magnify, and that's why, in that conference we want both seasoned, experienced senior leaders and also young emerging leaders to come to that table, discuss about their roles. Now, you mentioned already that the senior leaders, they should take initiative, saying that we have a problem. We should not die before we, raise
Hopefully
our
not.
successors.
Exactly.
Yeah, without, because if you die before you raise your successor, means you don't have any legacy. And that's really one of the regrettable things in life, knowing that your vision, what you have invested, are going to go with you. So now they have to pick this challenge and say, okay, we have a generational gap. We have to raise the next generation. But the youth also, the young generation, they should also have this humility, as you said, as some of the youth that came to you saying that I need help. They should first be humble, knowing, playing around with technologies, being energetic and, having education and so on. It doesn't really help you to tackle the challenges that we face. As a young person, you may need wisdom. You can get that. You don't need to wait until you become old to learn wisdom. You can tap from the previous generation, the senior leaders. And you need also seeing things in context and so on because of their experience, because of their exposure and so on. The senior leaders, they could be able to give these young generation leaders context. Whatever they have, in their mind, whatever passion they have to put it into context. As an individual, you can't really succeed and get fulfilled successfully without working with others, without contributing for collective success. Therefore, in this conference, our expectation is the panelists from emerging and senior leaders to talk about the roles of their generation. How can they come together and share some of those responsibilities too? Because it takes both generations to take responsibility. Be humble, know that this is something that we do as a village, not individually.
And that is why the community as a whole has to spread the word that we have the problem. Then it is up to those individuals to get involved. And that's what we have to do. The persuasive effort must be directed to the leaders of the community and with encouragement built in to get them involved in the changing of America, in the changing of our culture. And I'll tell you, when I chaired one of the youth programs at the county which I've developed high school programs, county programs, entrepreneurial programs,
we need your
and they're
kind of
all
people.
sustainable. Yeah. They're all sustained. Because I built them on sustainability. But before I connected any adult to the young people that would be attending whichever group that they were going to be working with, I made sure that they knew Maslow's hierarchy of need. That was my first line of business, because you can't attempt to educate, to teach, to recruit, or to expect a child to change if you don't know Maslow, which says that if they don't have a home, if they don't have food, if they don't have shelter...
What about self-realization? Yeah.
Then you have a problem, because you have to help them overcome that. A child can't learn on an empty stomach. And that's the first level. So as you go up the chart and you start taking a look, if you don't have a home, if you don't have safety, if you don't feel secure, if you don't have a sense of belonging to somebody or something, going back to the circle, where it's a family, community, and the peers, if your family is not intact, you're going to look to the community. If the community doesn't help, you're going to turn to your peers. And that's where a lot of times the influencing factor comes in to make them go in one direction or another direction. So that circle is very important. But before you can help a child, you have to know what their needs are. And once you meet them where their needs exist, then you can get them to the table. Once you get them to the table and show your heart, that I got you a place to live. You're safe. You're secure. You belong to my group here. Once you get them to that stage, they'll want to join you. And that has always been my philosophy. Know the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Connect with them on where their needs are. Okay. Show them your heart. And if you show them your heart, then they will follow your lead. And we need more leaders to understand that in order to do what Dr. Du Bois said, raise the next generation to take our place and to be a talented 10th person who gets yours and gives back, then you better understand Maslow in concert with that.
So you raised a very important structure, because understanding that structure, that backbone is very important to bridge the generational gap. Understanding that from the family it goes to community, and then from the community to the peer, and then to society, which is a school. And it's also to understand also that we need to know their needs, hierarchical needs, because if we could not be able to meet the first layer, which is food, shelter, and so on, and if somebody doesn't have security, which means job, it doesn't matter if they don't have, a feeling of ownership, like at the community level and so on. They don't attempt to realize their potential. They don't attempt to become significant. We are talking about, when we bridge the generational gap, we're talking about somebody seeking to contribute something to their community. But as you said, if some of their needs are not met, how can they focus? How can they contribute in bridging the gap? The senior leaders may have all those layers, hierarchies met, so they have all their needs are met. They are focused on the significance level, which is the top in the Maslow's hierarchy. And then they're ready. But what about the emerging young generation? If they are at the bottom, which is searching for survival, it's very hard for them to come to the table, get mentored, and contribute for what is significant, what's important, what's relevant to their community and to their country. So it's very important. Another thing I want us to discuss about is the factors that are very important. We know the structure is very important. We know we need to identify the needs. Then what's next, which means how can we make our institutions, such as the educational institutions, how can we design mentoring programs and so on, so that once the youth, they are ready, come to the table, what are the factors that should be considered to bridge the generational gap? What kind of education policy systems do we need? What kind of curricula we need? What kind of mentoring programs, because you have been mentoring, do we need to bridge the generational gap?
You're beginning to see, and have for the last 5 or 6 years, schools allowing mentoring organizations to come in and work with students in their institution. And we're beginning to see great results when they open up their doors to mentoring groups coming in to meet with kids during and after school to help guide their footsteps. That's already happening, and that's a good thing. When I was CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, one of the programs that I created was a program to where businesses surrounding that school would lend assistance to the school and help supply pens and pencils and things of that nature to that community school. It was a community-based initiative. And it was in concert with our government's program of building livable communities. So livable communities takes our business community, it takes those mentors you spoke of, it takes our schools. So what happened is we began to incorporate mentoring groups into the schools, and businesses began to adopt those schools. What did it do? It led to the possibility of many of the students now been hired by our business community to work summer programs, to become interns, and to connect with the business community so they could learn how to work. Many students didn't know how to work. They didn't know how to dress to go to work. So they learned that from the mentoring clubs. So once they learned how to dress for success and how to communicate and how to interview, then the businesses would come in and they would interview some students.
And hire them.
And they would hire them. Is that a step in the right direction?
Yes.
It certainly is. So that is the ground floor. And it gets back to the way we started this conversation. Let's get back to basics, because that is a basic technique that incorporates the business community in our schools, it incorporates the mentoring groups in our schools, and it helps our schools by giving them that additional asset to educate our children.
By the way, that's why you mentioned a very important idea, which is incorporating businesses into what communities are doing, what schools are doing. In this conference, we allowed businesses to sponsor the conference because we thought if they come there and sponsor the conference, they would come with their people, both senior and emerging leaders. If they don't have that kind of strata, at least they can come there and learn the importance of thinking about the next leaders of that business. Mm-hmm. So to do that, what we did was the sponsorship. We said, okay, donate up to $250. We give you a table to display your products and services, but come with 10 of your people. So the idea is they have the opportunity to sponsor 10 of their people, bring them there, let them learn from you and other speakers. We have 3 other speakers, around 8 panelists, 4 seasoned and experienced leaders, and 4 emerging leaders from diverse cultures. Ethiopians, African Americans, white, Asians, Spanish speakers. So they can come there and learn from people from diverse culture about bridging the generational gap. So incorporating businesses, you did a great job, because we need to find a way to involve businesses and organizations into what communities are doing, what schools are doing.
If you don't, then you're not using all the tools in your society to make the change you're looking for. If you're going to be able to move from a disconnect between generations to a unified, more unified generation, whereas we're all working together, it has to start at the basic level.
Exactly.
It has to start not only with that family, but it has to start in that community, whereas they say, we're going to change our community, and if we change our community, we're going to change the world. And that's what it's all about. And businesses are stepping up to the plate too, and they're assuming a larger responsibility, because they know that in our capitalist society, our whole society is based on the principle of entrepreneurship, people working in those businesses, and then contributed monetarily to the society, and therefore helping raise that next generation with the same principles.
But we talked about how schools, communities, and businesses should come together in bridging the generational gap. Let's talk about other institutions who should also join forces in bridging the generational gap, like governments, multinational organizations. How can these organizations, government, can contribute to bridge the generational gap?
Great question. I was appointed by the governor for the state of Maryland to be a commissioner on the governor's Small Business Commission. On the commission, I chaired the Workforce and Education Committee. In creating new paradigms, the way of thinking, I went out and talked to college presidents, and I also talked to our government, and I took a look at how we were communicating with the schools and colleges, especially the community college. And President Obama has put a lot of emphasis on the community colleges. And I also looked at the way government was structured so that we could see how the two were working the future employment initiatives. And so in talking to the presidents of the colleges and universities across the state of Maryland, I would often say, one of the big demands coming to the state of Maryland in the future, not so distant future, will be IT and cybersecurity and things of that nature. I said, what are you doing to prepare the generations to come of Marylanders to get those jobs in cybersecurity? And we would share what they were doing, but they would share with me what their needs were. So then I would go back to the state commission and I would say, you know, the colleges are doing this, but they said they could do a lot more if they had the support here monetarily, and if they knew exactly what you were planning in the governor when it comes to job creation, then they could develop the curriculum to make sure that they addressed the need. So, so it gets back to Maslow from an economical and a business standpoint. What are you doing in government when you go on all these trips to Europe and you say jobs are coming to Maryland? What jobs? What types of jobs? What types of skills will you need? What's the timeline for making sure that we have a workforce prepared to get the healthcare jobs, the IT jobs, the cybersecurity jobs, and manufacturing jobs? So if the colleges know what the government knows, then they can develop the curriculum to address the need. Now you can start preparing people and hiring people. When I was at the Health and Human Services, when I was the Health and Human Services Director, we announced that a major attraction was coming to Prince George's, which is National Harbor. And I hope you've been there. It's very beautiful.
Oh, yeah, I've been there. Very beautiful.
Well, we announced that under the county executive, and then I was Health and Human Services Director, which was one of the leaders of the county. And so my thing was, that's absolutely wonderful. But as the human services guy now, my question is, who's going to work there?
Do we have the people?
Where are the people? And how they trained? So anyway, we got in a discussion, and we said, we need to develop some type of training program.
Yeah.
So the result of that was to work with Prince George's Community College and create the Hospitality and Tourism program now located at Prince George's Community College. That's a good example of government and colleges and education institutions working together to prepare that next generation so that they will have jobs. And once you have jobs, you got security. Then you become that family on top of community, on top of that social circle.
Yeah, I think I like that, as a trainer, sometimes I facilitate discussion on strategic planning, and we use one of the tools, you already may know them, about scenario planning, futures will, and so on, to bring stakeholders and think about what's going to happen 20 years from now. Now, as you said, as you indicated, okay, what are the needs 20 years from now? These stakeholders could be hospitals, universities, government, county leaders, and so on. And each stakeholder may, suggest some needs. And then, as you mentioned, okay, these are the needs. But what about the people who may meet those needs? What kind of education do they need? From where can we get them? Can we make them ready in the coming 20 years, in the coming 10 years? And universities and other stakeholders, they suggest, okay, we can raise these people by doing that in this. So all the stakeholders suggest what the roles of their organization to challenge these needs and obstacles and challenges. So I think we need different stakeholders to come together, maybe brainstorm and strategize. Let's say, how can we bridge the generational gap, let's say, in Prince George's County or in Montgomery County? Stakeholders sitting together, strategizing, brainstorming, how can we bridge so that, the stakeholders, they can talk about the needs, the challenges, what kind of changes, policy changes, what kind of institutions may contribute in terms of money, in terms of material, in terms of idea, technology, and so on and so forth. And I believe that multinational organizations, both at the global level, like UN, UNESCO, and so on, I think they should be interested about bridging the generational gap. And these multinational organizations, they should find ways to support support nations, organizations, community organizations, schools, and societal, institutions to bridge their generational gap.
You know, there's various conferences that take place not only in this county, but across America that's dedicated to exactly that. And they have breakout sessions, they have training and education sessions, and they encourage people to come and attend. I can think of 2 or 3 that's happening right here in the county this year alone. Whereas organizations from a multicultural standpoint to economic standpoint, social standpoint, they all have their own focus. And they invite people to the table, just like the conference coming up in June, and encourage people to get involved. And then it's up to the person to really take the next step. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, in our conference, one of the things that, because I want you to comment on that, one of the challenges we have seen, we have arranged some conferences in the past, and as you mentioned, many organizations, they arrange conferences. The problem is that once that conference is gone, everything is gone. Maybe some individual may get some insights, tools, approach. They may take it to the next level. But mostly we don't have people or organizations or stakeholders owning the recommendations from that conference and take it to the next level. That's why in that conference, we want to, at the end of the conference, we have this part called What's Next. Now, we want to suggest some project. We want to hear from the speakers, the panelists, what pro-leadership could do together with other stakeholders, regional, national, and multinational organizations, so that we have owners. Because we should not come together in one day and spend 4 hours, talk great things, discuss great things, and disperse. We should find a way, bringing different stakeholders, let one organization or 2 or 3 organizations own that project, suggest some projects, suggest something to continue to be done, and even plan the next follow-up conference, let's say next year. Things will be done between now up to next year, and that will be reported to that conference, and we take it to the next level. So we should have that continuity. So we are now, the organizing committee, Carla Blue, your friend and my friend, we're talking about how we can find, ways to talk about what's next, and we should make sure that there is continuity, and there is also partnership across different industries at the regional, local, and national and global level.
A few years ago, I was invited to probably 3 or 4 conferences about community building. After the 3rd conference, which was held on a college campus, I was asked for remarks. And my remark was, I'm tired of coming to all these conferences to hear what we've already discussed so that we can set a date for the next conference. I said there has to be built in next steps.
Exactly.
I was one of the people that built, I think, one of the first total quality management programs for the United States Air Force right here in the Washington, D.C. area. Okay? And total quality management was based upon pulling your team together and finding out what the problems were, addressing those problems so that you could build greater programs, which required new paradigms. In order to build what you're talking about, something that is not just happening today, but is a sustainable programs, you have to go back and take a look at what made total quality management work. And what made it work was the small working groups. Not only do you have a conference, but you get the commitment of people that are willing to take the ideas to the next step, and you come up with timelines when you can meet and talk between that conference and the next conference, so that when you come back to the table, you're able to show some progression.
Exactly.
If you don't have those working groups or a working group, whatever you deem to be necessary based on the need, then you're just like everybody else that has a program and say, okay, we have our conference every year. No, you have to have the complements, just like some of the fraternities. they have conferences every year, but they have chapters set up that go back and institute the philosophy of the major chapter. And when they come back to the table, they tell what their chapter has done. And that's what working groups do while after following the chapter meeting. And then it continues because everybody's still talking. And you don't have to meet. You can do it by teleconferencing now.
Yeah.
But you need to have the working groups, as I still call them working groups because they worked under total quality management.
Yeah.
I still set up businesses based on total quality management principles. And during the recession, when I was president and CEO of the chamber, people said, how did you keep, I didn't lose any business to the recession. They said, how was that? You grew a business from 300 some to over 1,000 businesses in a couple of years. I said, number one, we asked them what their needs were. Number two, we asked them how could we help. Number three, we stayed involved with them and we helped them. Number four, they achieved success and they went and told somebody else. So I think that if you do the same thing at the conference and others do the same thing at the conference, ask what the needs are, and then you show your heart and you satisfy or help satisfy those needs, you keep the conversations going. At the very end, as people start to see positive results, you're going to get more and more people to the table because now you're leading by example.
Exactly.
Okay.
By the way, it looks like you are reading our minds because one of the things we were talking, of course, we're going to suggest to the conference participants and see what they're going to say. One of the things that we would like to talk about is what you mentioned, which is, okay, people once they come to that conference, get great insights, tools, and approach. They want to involve with the organization to continue to engage with us. For that, we thought, why don't we suggest for them, because we have this pros club, which means we can have, let's say, one pros club in Maryland or in Virginia, one in DC, and people every month may come together. I mean, seasoned and emerging leaders coming to that club, continue to be mentored one another, continue to work together on some projects, continue to bridge that generational gap at the micro level in one metro area, next maybe to another metro area. So we are planning to engage conference participants. Once we are done with the conference, we have some suggestions. For example, we have a project that we suggest, for example, as a continuity, mentoring the mentors, and the mentors going to mentor emerging leaders. We have that project. We are looking for sponsors. We are trying to recruit mentees and mentors. And we have the framework. So we want to bring mentees and mentors together and help the process of this bridging the generational gap through mentoring and bridging the generational gap using clubs so that emerging, because we talk sometimes once per 3 months or once per year in conferences and workshops, and we disperse. And we come together again. Why don't we have that continuity by having a club? Like-minded people may come together, discuss about issues. We can structure about the schedule for that 1 hour. We can have 5 people maybe take 5 minutes to talk about their leadership project, the book, the summary of the book they read about leadership, something that they learned they want to share to the group, or a project they want the other members to involve, and so on and so forth. So one thing I don't want to forget is that what about the roles of media, for example, in bridging the generational gap? We have a press statement we send to some local media, and we hope that they may publish it. And also ESAT, as a community organization, ESAT is an educational organization. It's a community organization, a non-profit organization. With the limited, scarce resources ESAT has, it invests. We have now 2 educational programs, one in Amharic, local language, one in English. This is the English educational program. We would like to empower, and also it's a think tank organization where we bring experts like yourself to share their ideas. Last time we arranged a conference to bring experts to talk about peace, prosperity in Ethiopia and in the Horn of Africa. So ISAT also sponsored this event to cover the event for those people who couldn't be able to come there. They could be able to get the video so that they may be able to bridge the generational gap in their community, in their organization, and so on. So what should be the role of media in bridging the generational gap?
Well, let me also say that I believe in the Du Boisian principle of Pan-Africanism. I think we need to work together.
Yes.
And share our experiences so that we continue to grow together across multicultural areas. But I say that everything I do, I incorporate the media. I have made personal connections with media representatives from television and radio and newspapers, and I have found out when I want them to come to the table, I go to each one of them, and because I have connected with them, somebody's going to come to the table. It may be print media, it may be radio media, but you have to first of all establish that one-on-one relationship, whether it's just, I saw this in the news today, and I'm emailing it to you just so that you're aware. So I've done that. And the organizations that I work with, I do that for them too. On the other side of the coin, the role of the media is to be involved and to help you spread the word. Okay, and without that relationship building, many will write you off because we don't know these folks. Yeah. We don't know what they're doing. But
whether their time worth is to be there.
Yeah. But by building that relationship, they're more readily agreeable to come to the table. Now they're necessary because they can really take it a lot further and get a broader audience than any organization can. So it may take one-on-one meetings. It may go out and meet with them and say, this is what we're doing, and we're trying to help society to groom the next generation of young leaders, and then to tell them, and we want you to be a partner.
Exactly.
Because that now, if they agree, they become a stakeholder.
I think in this conference we should have a table for media, and they could come with their products, even with their brochures, with their product that they would like to promote, and because we have to create a win-win partnership. They cover the event, spread their news and their programs.
Because it helps them.
Yeah.
News medias really often are supported by businesses that advertise through them. And the broader audience they reach, the more funding comes into them as well. So I think that's a great idea. And many of the television programs, and especially radio, they come out on the spot because they see the value of connecting with the community, especially a multicultural type community, because everybody's at the table, and they don't want to miss that.
Exactly.
So last year, I guess 2 years ago, I worked with a Nigerian contingent to sponsor a youth summit here in Prince George's County.
Wow.
It went over very well. We received great media coverage because we went to them and said, we want you to be part of this. We definitely don't want you to be left out, because it was held the same week that the president was holding his African summit down in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So they may not have had access to that, but they had access to the African Youth Summit in Prince George's County. So we connected the dots and showed them that you can benefit from this, and we got coverage.
Oh, that's
so they became part of the stakeholders. So the media is very important because they can touch a broader audience, and that relationship building it will serve you well.
Yeah. So I know we have limited time. You have so many things to share, but our audience, if they are interested and if they are in the metro area, they may come to Prince George's Community College, and they can be part of this June 27 and hear more of your speech and other speakers and panelists. Thank you very much for coming. I know you are busy, but you came here to share your experience and the stories. I really appreciate that.
It's my pleasure, and I look forward to working with you more.
Yeah, definitely. On behalf of ISAT and our audience, once again, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Dear viewers, I hope that you enjoyed our discussion about bridging the leadership generational gap. You may be young, emerging leader, or you may be an experienced senior leader. You have to play your role so that we may bridge the generational gap. We have so many challenges in this world, in your community, in your organization. You can only solve it if you bring the two generations together and create an empowering environment so that you may tap into the potential of both senior and young leaders. Towards this endeavor, if you are interested and in the metro area, we invite you to come and learn more about it on June 27th, Saturday, June 27th, between 1 to 5 at Prince George's Community College. We look forward to see you there. Thank you very much for watching.